Music is just always there, right? It's the soundtrack to our lives, our commutes, our workouts, our biggest celebrations. It's this constant companion. But what happens when our world gets completely turned upside down? When a major crisis hits, does the music just stop? Or does it change its tune? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
Think about it for a second. A world war, a global pandemic. What do these massive, world-changing events actually sound like? We're going to explore the sound of two monumental crises separated by about a century: the First World War and the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll look at how music helped people cope, how the music itself changed, and really, what it tells us about who we are when we're pushed to the brink.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about one of music's most incredible superpowers, its ability to bring us together, to create a sense of community right when we feel most alone.
And what's so fascinating is how this slide shows the exact same human impulse playing out 100 years apart. Back in World War I, connection meant literally getting together in person, singing with your neighbors in public squares or with strangers at train stations. Now, fast forward a century to the pandemic, that very same need for connection, it was just channeled through our screens, right? The venue changed from the city square to our social media feed, but that desire to share a musical moment, it was exactly the same.
During the Great War, this wasn't just a spontaneous thing that happened here and there. Allied governments actually pushed for communal singing. It was a real strategy to build up a sense of national unity, to keep morale high. Getting everyone to sing the same patriotic songs was an incredibly powerful tool for the war effort.
And this quote shows just how powerful that tool was. Picture this. It's a military hospital in England filled with wounded soldiers from different Allied nations. You've got British aristocrats next to working-class Frenchmen, all of them singing together. And in that moment, music just erased all the social and national lines that would normally keep them apart. It's pretty amazing.
And then, sometimes, that unity was completely unplanned. After a German U-boat sank the passenger ship Lusitania in 1915, the American composer Charles Ives happened to be at a train station in New York. And as this horrible news started spreading through the crowd, he just watched as total strangers, all overcome with this shared grief, just started singing a hymn together. A raw, powerful, spontaneous moment of shared mourning, all through music.
Okay, now let's jump forward 100 years. That same impulse for a shared musical experience, it didn't go away, it just went online. Instead of singing in a train station, we were all tuning into things like the iHeart Living Room concert or Together at Home. We were watching our favorite artists live streaming from their couches. The technology was totally different, but that fundamental need to connect through song in a crisis was just as strong as ever.
But here's the thing. Crises don't just change how we listen. They can bring the entire music industry to a grinding halt. So now let's look at the Great Disruption, at what happens when, for so many people, the music nearly stopped for good. So to really get the scale of this disruption, you have to understand what was being disrupted in the first place. The World War I era, well, it was a peak time for active music making. This was way before radio and records took over everything. People played instruments at home, they bought sheet music, they sang together. It was a genuinely participatory musical culture. Now, contrast that with our modern music industry, which is so heavily built on one thing, live performance. And in 2020, that just vanished. According to Pollstar, the global live music industry lost an estimated $30 billion in revenue that year. That number is just staggering. And that abstract number gets very real, very fast when you think about the legendary events that were just gone. Coachella, Glastonbury, Lollapalooza, some of the biggest cultural gatherings on the entire planet, just wiped off the calendar. For the first time in decades, the summer was silent. Millions of tickets went unused, and countless artists, road crews, and vendors were suddenly out of work. So, we've seen how we experience music in a crisis. But what about the music itself? Does the actual sound of our pop charts change when the world is in turmoil? It's a pretty interesting question. Well, back in World War I, the answer was a definite yes. There was this fascinating study that analyzed over 250 popular songs written about the service flag. That's the flag families would display to show they had a loved one in the military. At the beginning of the war, the songs are full of all this patriotic energy. But as the war drags on and the death toll just keeps climbing, the songs become overwhelmingly about loss, mourning, and remembering. You can literally track the nation's changing mood through its sheet music. So that brings us to the big question, right? Did the same thing happen during the pandemic? Did all the anxiety and the isolation of lockdown actually seep into the songs that were topping the charts? Well, according to a really detailed analysis of Spotify's top tracks, it absolutely did. The study found that in the years leading up to 2020, popular music was actually getting louder and more energetic, but during the pandemic, that trend completely flipped. The songs that got popular were more introspective, they were softer, more acoustic. Basically, the party music faded out and the bedroom pop took over.
And this chart just shows that shift perfectly. You can see a really clear spike in acousticness and instrumentality. So, think more pianos and guitars, fewer big synths. And at the same time, a noticeable drop in the overall energy. Our collective playlist got quieter and more thoughtful, pretty much mirroring the world outside our windows.
But, this whole story isn't just about unity and quiet reflection. The legacy of music in times of crisis is way more complicated, and sometimes it can be just as divisive as it is unifying. Let's go back to that communal singing in World War I for a second. While it brought a whole lot of people together, we also have to remember that it was used to draw lines. That patriotic music helped to find a national us, which, by its very nature, creates a them. So this powerful tool for unity could also be used to fuel aggressive nationalism and exclude minority groups. It's a complicated legacy.
And what's maybe the most surprising thing of all is that sometimes the response to a massive crisis is just silence. The 1918 influenza pandemic killed tens of millions of people, yet almost no music was written about at the time. It's been called a national silencing. Now compare that to COVID-19, which triggered this absolute explosion of creativity. Hundreds of songs about lockdown, hope, social distancing. The difference is just stark. It really shows how much our relationship with music in crisis has changed.
So, what's the takeaway from all this? Well, a few things seem really clear. First, our need to connect through music in a crisis is a human constant, whether we're gathered in a train station or watching a live stream. Second, the sound of our music really does act like a barometer for our collective mood, shifting from patriotic anthems to mournful ballads in one era and from high-energy pop to quiet introspection in another. And finally, it's a powerful reminder that this incredible tool for unity can also be used to draw lines and define who belongs and who doesn't. Which leaves us with one last crucial question to think about. When we all start singing the same song, who are we forgetting to listen to?